Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. My favorite part about any core set release is the lore, and with the release of Photon Hypernova, the end of the Albaz Storyline is in sight. Cyberstorm Access is said to be the spectacular last episode, so today's new cards have the unenviable task of setting up a grand finale, in more ways than one. However, we've been thrown another curveball. Most releases will introduce a new archetype to represent some faction that's been thrown into the mix. But this time around, it seems that all the players have already taken center stage, which kinda messes with my formula. Normally, I talk about the new releases while covering the lore to highlight how their effects and mechanics tie into the story, so today, we're going to do something a bit different. We'll cover all the new cards archetype by archetype, providing as much context for how it fits into their own theme and the story as a whole, before moving on to the lore section, where we won't be cutting in to explain any of the cards. If you like this new format, let me know in the comments. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, it's time to call this intermission to a close, have all the actors take their places, and see what fate has in store for the one-eyed dragon and the fallen saint. It's time to explain the Photon Hypernova Albaz lore. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what I do. Once we get to 40k, we're doing our next 5Ds video on Leo and Luna, and every sub helps. Also check out my Discord where this image has no context, and I kinda like it that way. And my Twitch where you can watch me put all my lessons to the test live with viewer duels. And if you want to go that extra mile, join my Patreon where you can get my videos early and help us reach these video milestones. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. Let's start with the return of one of our favorite little tech gremlins, Kit, though not as a tri-brigade. They've returned from their mission in the Land of Iron, and with some help from Albaz, have formed Lindworm the Gunhammer Dragon, a level 8 Dark Winged Beast fusion monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, requiring Fallen of Albaz and one tri-type monster, or a Beast, Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast type monster for the uninitiated. When a fusion, synchro, exceeds, or link monster's effect is activated as a quick effect, you can negate that effect, then return a monster on the field to the hand. And during either player's turn, if this card is in your grave as a quick effect, you can target a Fallen of Albaz in your grave, and if both are still in your grave, special summon either that monster or this card, and if you do, banish the other. This probably makes Lindworm the strongest utility Albaz fusion out of the bunch. As a monster, it casts a wide net while being non-targeting, non-destruction removal. And while in the grave, you can quick summon Albaz to spring a mini super poly on your opponent. Notably though, if you just send this to the grave with an effect like Mirror Jades, you won't be able to summon Lindworm with its own effect. But if it's sent to the grave properly, you can revive it. And it's also a free negate, which cannot be understated. And whichever one you do banish can just be put back into your deck when being used as fusion material via Lubellion. The only real problem is that if you want to use this in tri-brigade, branded fusion might not always be the best option. Like, yeah, you could send a Kit to send Nerval to get you a search, but once you've locked yourself into only fusions for the turn, you're gonna have to wait before you can fully utilize that tri-brigade. But having another branded and high spirits target ain't so bad. Now, it's no secret that this card looks super sick. Kit's piloting a dragon mech with shoulder-mounted electro cannons, Albaz is riding shotgun, but the winged beast typing seems to be a bit out of place. Kit is a tri-brigade, sure, but a beast, no wings included. This leads me to believe that Mercurier is some kind of base component for Lindworm, maybe the monster's core. This might seem to contradict the fact that a similar looking bird shows up in Shraig's new form in this set, but if you look at their original art, you'll see that Shraig has two Mercurier, while the new art only has one. And because Sprind, the Iron Dash Dragon, has set a precedence for Albaz being able to animate and empower machines, I'm confident saying that Lindworm is the combination of some other vehicle Kit brought to the battlefield. I'm currently of a mind that it's some form of Bearbrum or whatever was left over to make their mech suit in Springin's kit, and Albaz using their power to infuse that machine with Mercurier, forming Lindworm. Sorry, I know this got really long-winded and detail-oriented, but I really wanted to hammer in the point. But that's not the only new piece of tech Kit brought to the battle. They've got a kickin' new cannon that Shraig is itching to try out, introducing Tri-Brigade Arms Bucephalus II, a Link 5 Dark Winged Beast monster with 3500 attack, requiring 3 or more Tri-type monsters as material. It's got a continuous effect that keeps your opponent from activating cards or effect when you special summon any number of monsters, and when any monster declares an attack, you can banish this card, also banish all cards your opponent controls. And if this card is sent to the grave, you can send any tri-type monster from your extra deck to the grave. This all sounds pretty nutty, especially because you can shred a lot of cards from your grave to summon this with the tri-brigade's patented grave linking effect. The problem is that little line of text right here at the start that says this card can't be special summoned from the extra deck if you have 2 or less tri-brigade spells or traps in your grave. This means you need to be running and have used 3 or more of them before you can even think of putting this onto the field. And our spell and trap quality is... well, Revolt is notoriously powerful, no doubt about that. Quick effect Shrag while triggering a bunch of other effects is nothing to sneeze at. But things go a bit downhill from there. Airborne Assault is pretty good, but does require some setup, and locks us into only using links, but that's kind of our whole thing, so that's not really an issue. Rendezvous is a quick stat buff that can protect your monsters while in the grave, but don't use that grave effect, because banishing it will take away from your grave count. Oath is another setup-heavy card that, once again, has some grave utility that will mess with your numbers if you use it, and the rest of our cards are continuous, not exactly helping to pull their weight. So, all that being said, I doubt Bucephalus is going to see a lot of play, unless people want to use Foolish Burial goods to help load up the grave, or use extra Foolish Burial shenanigans to send it right to the grave, thereby triggering its other effect to bin another tri-type from your extra deck to the grave, including Garura for a free draw. Then using Phantom of Chaos to mimic Bucephalus and get the board wipe. This Link 5 is really good, I just wish it wasn't horsing around so much. Now, we're done with Kit's contributions, but the Springans are here as well, championed by the new king of the Therian Ring, Gigantic Champion Sargus, a rank 8 Fire Machine Xyz monster with 2800 attack and 1500 defense, requiring 2 or more level 8 monsters as material. But once per turn, you can also use a Springans Xyz monster you control as material, transferring all that monster's materials over to this one. If this card has material, you can just add a Springans or Therian card from your deck to your hand once per turn, no big deal. And if material are detached from a monster on the field, you can target a card on the field and either destroy it or return it to the hand. Wow, this card is wild! So the bummer here is that it isn't actually a Springans monster, so you're not able to use your engraved Springans to immediately attach themselves to Gigantic Sargus as material for free. So once you run out of material, that's it. However, the Springans Xyz you overlaid this onto can totally be a target for that, loading up as many as possible before making the upgrade. And as long as you keep a single material under this, you'll get the free search every turn. It also checks to see if material are detached from anywhere on the field, counting your other monsters, so this Sargus gives you a little extra bonus. Not that it has an effect that removes its own material, but we'll get to that. Heck, it even checks your opponent's monsters, so if they use Xyz, they're gonna have to watch how they use their effects. Not to mention that the effect to destroy or bounce isn't chosen until resolution, so if the target becomes immune to effect destruction, you can just bounce it back. Heck, you can even bounce Gigantic Sargus itself back to the extra deck if it runs out of material to set up another Xyz summon. This is, by far, one of the coolest cards Springans have ever gotten a hold of. So by utilizing the fighting prowess of Sargus, empowered by the gigantic R-Gyro system of the Therian's Ring, there isn't anything your opponent can spring on you can't handle. We also have the delightfully named Tally-Ho Springans, a quick play spell that, when activated, lets you detach up to 3 material from monsters you control. Tally-Ho adds a Springans monster from your deck to your hand, already a pretty good deal. Then, if you detached a material at activation, you can special summon Springans from your hand and or grave equal to the number of material you detached. And if this card is in the grave, you can target an Xyz monster on the field, detach a material from it, and if you do, add this card to your hand. But you can only use one effect per turn, and only once per turn. This card is super awesome, as you not only get a search, you can end up summoning a bunch of Springans in the process. I believe the intention is to load up as many Springans from the grave as possible, then detach them so they're back in the grave, ready to be special summoned by Tally-Ho's effect. The recycling ability is also quite nice, especially because you can, once again, take a material from your opponent's Xyz monster for this. And to top it all off, it has great synergy with Gigantic Sargus, because all this detaching of material, especially when it's at quick effect speed, means more removal. Gosh, I hope they keep this translation for the TCG. Yelling "Tally-ho!" while unleashing a horde of missile people would simply be the best. Gigantic Thunder Cross is more of a lore card than actual support, but we take those. It's a normal trap card that targets monsters on the field and or in the grave, equal to the difference between the number of both players' banished cards, and banish those targets. Then your opponent can special summon one monster from their deck. My best interpretation for how this effect is supposed to reflect the lore is, since the Bestials banish a lot of cards for their summons, Thunder Cross is meant to punish them for relying on that, and thus, Albaz gets its face smashed in, but since Lubellion was attached to it, they get called to the field, mimicking how your opponent gets a monster when you do this. Though this could easily be the other way around, you would have to banish 5 monsters from your grave to use the Tri-Brigade's Gravelinking effect to summon Bucephalus II, so that could represent how powerful the cannon is. It's all kind of muddy here. As a card, I could definitely see this being played in niche scenarios, either against a deck that banishes a whole lot while you don't, or the reverse, as it checked the difference between banished cards, but doesn't care who has more or less than the other. And not only does it hit monsters on the field, but in the grave as well. The trade-off is that your opponent gets any monster they want from their deck, and that can be a pretty big issue. But if you build your deck around this properly, you'll have a countermeasure ready for that as well. And you know, if you play Gigantic Sprite, you can make it so your opponent can only summon a level 2 monster, so there's that. And because you can trap trick this into existence, not to mention it's a normal trap card that can remove monsters from the field, Labyrinth may have just found a new, exciting piece of tech to add to their arsenal, and really bring the thunder. That about covers Albaz, the Tri-Brigade, and the Springans, but that's not the extent of our protagonists' cards. Carrying the spirit of the Ice Jade Queen and their Sword Soul protectors, Ice Jade Aegerin Jymir is a level 10 Water Aqua Synchro monster with 3000 attack and 1500 defense, requiring a Water Tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters as material. As a quick effect, you can make face-up monsters you control become unable to be destroyed or banished by your opponent's card effects for the rest of the turn. Then, if this effect was activated in response to an opponent's card or effect, you can banish all cards with that name on your opponent's field or in their grave. And if any number of cards are banished by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your grave, you can special summon this card. Wow, this card is savage. While Ice Jades aren't exactly tearing up the top tables, its requirements and level make it a strong pick in any Sword Soul deck. It provides destruction and banishing protection for your entire board of monsters that doubles as removal, and it gets to be revived for free if your opponent banishes anything by a card effect. Not cost, so you don't get to trigger it off of the Tenyi Spirit activations or when the Sword Souls are making tokens, but when Sinister Longyuan hits the board, your opponent better be careful about how they use it. And with the help of your field spell, this could also just casually become Egyptian God Slime. It's a great level 10 synchro that's not exactly gonna push Barone out of contention anytime soon, but if anyone was going to expand this pool of monsters, it'd be our friends in the Water Aqua sector. They also get a new spell card, Great Ice Jade Manifestations, a normal spell card that you can activate if your opponent has a monster on the field and or in their grave, and you control a water monster. You can take an Ice Jade monster from your deck and either send it to the grave or special summon it. And if a face-up Ice Jade monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card, except by being destroyed and during the damage step, you can banish this card from your grave, then target one card your opponent controls and banish it. So this means generic destruction removal or being run over in battle won't trigger this, but if the monster is banished, bounced, or spun back to the deck, you get a retaliatory banish. And as long as your opponent controls a monster, you get a free one of your own. Or set up a grave effect. Ice Jades have quite a few that help mobilize our waters, even if how we accomplish this is a little wishy-washy. But who is it that the Ice Jades are fighting in the art? Well, it's none other than Longyuan. That's right, not content to be buried under a pile of ice after getting completely bodied by Mirror Jade, Longyuan was fused with the Great Serpent of Golgonda to create Sword Soul Dragon of the Abyss, a level 8 fire worm monster with 3000 attack and 2900 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by a worm monster's effect. If any number of monsters are banished by a card effect, except during during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your grave if it was there when that monster was banished, or from the hand even if not, but banish it when it leaves the field. If this card is special summoned, you can target a card in the field zone and a monster your opponent controls or is in their grave, and banish them. This card is, well, I mean, it's a heck of a discard for Long Yuan's effect, because now if you banish with Sword Soul Sovereign, you get a free monster out of it. However, since its effect can only be used when a field spell is out, it's more of a tech pick to deal with decks that use them. Alternatively, this makes for some nice level 8 material, especially because the base version of this, Supreme Sovereign Serpent of Golgonda, can be summoned from the hand or grave if you have a field spell on board. If you do any banishing for your own card effects, this card's a breeze to summon, and when you tuck it under, say, a Dingirsu, it'll go right back into your grave when detached, so you can do it all over again. Combined with a rough level, I think it's safe to say that this card has some nifty applications, but doesn't fit in very well with its original theme. In fact, you could say it's pretty abysmal. But that's as good a segue as any to talk about the rest of our villains cards. So next up is another member of everyone's favorite new Dragon Link extenders, Bestial Baldrake, a level 6 Dark Dragon monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, and does the usual bestial thing. You can target a light or dark monster in either grave, banish it, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. And it's a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. And if your opponent special summons any number of Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and or Link monsters, you can tribute one other light or dark monster, then target one of those summoned monsters and banish it. A pretty strong effect, though an extremely telegraphed one. You can't even have Baldrake tribute itself, so you can play around this effect simply by depriving your opponent of other lights and darks on their board. Though it is another bestial name, and that's good in and of itself. DD Crow on a gigantic body is a lot to like. But the ones that see more play trigger simply by being summoned or by being sent from the field to the grave, whereas this one has to stick around and cash in other monsters to make a trade. The banishing is nice, true, but the rest of it is kinda balls. Gronginol, the Finale Dragon, is a level 8 light spellcaster fusion monster with 2500 attack and defense, requiring Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous and a light or dark monster as material. If this card is fusion summoned, you can send a level 6 or higher light or dark monster from your deck or extra deck to the grave. And if any number of monsters are special summoned by an opponent's activated monster effect, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from your field or grave to special summon a Dogmatica monster from your deck or a Despia monster from your extra deck. While not Despia by name, it is fitting that this monster is named after a venue that would regularly host plays that involved violence and torture. This is a very strong option for Blazing Cartesia's fusion effect. Being able to send any level 6 or higher light or dark monster from either of your decks to the grave can cause some serious trouble for the game. Not only are all the Albaz dragons on the table for this, you can send a Malicious, Bestial Lubellion, or one of over 1,000 other choices. And if you think the specific material requirements lock this into particular decks, you should see the kind of silly things people are doing with the light hex-sealed fusion nowadays. As for its other effects, it seems super powerful, but has deceptively few targets. You can't summon the Ritual Dogmaticas with this, so the only defensible summon is Ecclesia, and there are currently 2 extra deck Despia monsters, and Quiritus is already very accessible, though to be fair, having an easy way to access Priscinian is nice. But that's about all we can celebrate, as the dragonic form of the White Knight of Dogmatica has connected with the fallen Ecclesia, as we can see in the concept art, setting the stage for the grand finale. See? What'd I tell you? But it's not just the Despia, but the vestiges of the Dogmatica Church that have taken the field, and an absolutely ridiculous card they have access to now is Dogmaticatrix, a continuous spell card that, when activated, adds a Dogmatica ritual monster or spell from your deck to your hand. Then, if your opponent controls a monster, you can add any Dogmatica card from your deck to your hand. Talk about value. And once per turn, if you control a Dogmatica ritual monster, you can look at either player's extra deck and send a monster from it to the grave. So as a payoff for playing the ritual monsters, you get a very miniature Lithosigem. You can either gain access to your opponent's extra deck and take one of their best cards away, or better yet, learn exactly what they're playing if you manage to go first, or you can dig through your own extra deck and trigger a variety of effects, because on top of the Albaz dragons, Herald of the Arc Light makes for a positively powerful powerful pick for consistency, or you can send Intis or Fossil Warrior Skull Knight as removal. And since you can do this every turn, the benefits will accumulate the longer your opponent leaves this be, and they'll see just how deep the rabbit hole goes. But what's that creature inside the Theater of the Branded? A monstrosity, that's what. Presenting White Zoa of Dogmatica, a level 12 light spellcaster ritual monster with 4,000 attack and defense that you can ritual summon with Dogmatic Calamity, and can't be ritual summoned except with a Dogmatica card's effect, presumably to keep Drytron from getting their grubby little mitts on this. While on the field, Dogmatica monsters you control are unaffected by your opponent's activated Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link monsters' effects, and during your main phase, you can make your opponent choose one of the two following effects. Either they send a card from their hand and or extra deck to the grave for every 2 cards in their extra deck, their choice, or return all Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link monsters they control to the extra deck. So, by itself, being immune to the effects of things like Mirror Jade, Kaleido Heart, and Zeus is fantastic, and extending it to all of your on-theme monsters can be downright oppressive. Its activated effects are pretty neat, but I'm always wary of giving my opponent choices, especially when one of them gives them even more options to send cards to the grave, especially when we're in a format with so many extra deck monsters with good grave effects. Thankfully, our ritual spells make this card very easy to summon, so at the very least the investment is low for a monster that makes up half the starting life point total. But in a bit of a flavor fail, none of the other members of the Zoa archetype mesh well with this card, so that's a bit of a bummer. Our last section involves new branded cards, the spells and traps that are involved in so many of this story's archetypes. Branded Inevitable is a continuous trap card, and once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a bestial monster you control and no other cards, or when your opponent activates a card or effect in response to your bestial monster's activation, you can target a light or dark monster in either grave, banish it, and if you do, negate that activated effect. This makes for a pretty nifty protection effect to keep your opponent from messing with your bestials, and kind of functions as one itself, carrying the banishing a light or a dark effect that the level 6 bestial monsters possess. And while in most cases it being a continuous trap card would be a huge knock on its playability, Lubellian's bestial form can just place it face up on the field from your deck for free, making this stupendously accessible. Bestial have already been seeing a ton of play, and with support like this, their takeover is inevitable. The final card is also one of our saddest, which seems to be a trend over these past few sets. Branded Light is a quick play spell card that targets a fusion monster on the field or in either player's grave. You return it to the extra deck, then you can special summon a Fallen of Albaz from your grave and a monster from your opponent's grave to their owner's field. Mechanically, this works as an interesting defusion, kicking a fusion monster back to the extra deck to set up an Albaz fusion summon. And since you can choose the summoned monster your opponent gets, you can ensure you don't give them free advantage for it if possible. Then Albaz just scoops up the monster to make a fusion. Heck, it even makes one of the previously most difficult ones to make, Sprind, a guaranteed fallback in case nothing else works out, because whatever you summon will meet Sprind's fusion requirements. So it's not light on plays. Now, that's all the cards, but before we get into the lore section of the video, I wanted to share some more information that I've been made privy to recently. Fellow YouTuber Scarlawn messaged me as the new cards were releasing and drew a lot of connections between what's happening in the lore to the Book of Revelations, as well as William Blake's The Four Zoas poem. It's a lot of info, and I don't know how to include all of it without making the video drag on forever, so there's going to be a pinned comment down below detailing all the information Scarlawn provided to me. So if you like what you've seen here today, make sure you press that subscribe button, and also follow the card in the top right to go subscribe to her. There is one thing I'll include though, because there's a very visual piece of information. This image that shows the relationship of the four Zoas, beings who were created from the division of Albion, the primeval man, and don't worry, you have heard that name before if you've been paying attention. What's most striking about this image is that it exactly matches Branded in White, which was an image just preceding Albaz's transformation into Albion. And it's in the art of Alba Lenatus, hovering just in front of the central red orb. However, this egg-shaped portion isn't seen in any of the arts, but represents Adam and Satan, two pretty important biblical figures that could easily represent Albaz and Aluber. My current working theory is that each of the circles represents one of the bestial and or Albaz dragons, with the egg representing which of either Albaz and Aluber have which aspects. Love and Sense, the two middle ones, are possessed in some measure by both, where only Albaz has imagination, while Aluber has reason. But there is another theory that, since the bestials share aspects of Brigand, that they're actually just 4 aspects of that Albaz dragon specifically, so hopefully the final chapter of the story will give us an answer on whichever one is true, or if there's some other option we've yet to consider. Once again, for more information, check out the pinned comment, as there is a lot we can glean from the source material, and can help us predict what happens in the next set. As for the lore itself, well, strap yourselves in, folks, this is where things get real. Albaz stands astride his tri-brigade companions in the waning dusk of the desert of Golgonda. It wasn't long ago that he'd escaped the holds of Alba Lenatus, avoiding a fate tied to a twisted reflection of himself. Though, escape would imply that Albaz had anything to do with it. No, it was all part of Lubellian's plan. The white brand of Albaz had been absorbed, and with his ejection, shattered, releasing the 4 bestial dragons within. He had felt those dragons' presence when gifted the power of the Sword Soul in the Ice Jade, these raging creatures reflected in the deadly smooth surface of his many blades. But this was to be expected. After all, the blades of the Guardians of the Peak were extensions of their wielders' souls. Why not too, then, would this gift do the same to Albaz? Perhaps taking on such power was a mistake, giving the bestials within enough control to help facilitate the fusion into Alba Lenatus. But it was too late to look back. What was done had been done, and now the only thing left to do was prepare for one final battle. Not just for his freedom, or the liberty of his companions, but for Ecclesia. When Albaz awoke from his captivity, the smashed head of her colossal hammer was the only thing of hers he could find. Lubellium and Ad Libitum were nowhere to be found, leaving behind only a handful of their dreadful minions to mop up. This could only mean one thing. They took Ecclesia. Whatever reason they were hunting them down for, whatever they had in mind for the duo, they had accomplished. But Albaz wouldn't sit idly by and let it happen. So now, it was time for war. But whatever Albaz was expecting, reality did not provide. When the numerous holes tore open the sky, he was prepared. This was, after all, a tactic the Despia had used before. But the last thing he was expecting to see was a massive tower, a thing of spikes and ostentatious glamour, dropping from the sky and colliding with the dunes, causing sand to burst and ripple across the desert. And following that, a massive dragon, with 2 gnashing heads and eyes full of bloodlust. It reminded Albaz of the Nexus back in Dogmatica, and at its center, where once a golden idol maintained the balance of these twin dragons, was Lubellian, Aluber's bestial form, sheathed in white-silver armor hiding shrouded scales underneath. Ominously, the being that would be known as Albalos hung above the battlefield, Albaz and his companions waiting nervously for the Dogmatica forces to make the first move. The Despian Tower itself could be assaulted, surely, but the only one with the ability to meet Albalos in battle was Shreg, and no single person could hope to win a battle against a thing like that. Right as the tension seemed to be at its peak, Lubellian stepped forward, reverting to their humanoid form, the twisted reflection of Albaz that now held the world in its hands. The jester of Despia, not one to pass up an opportunity to amuse himself, taunted the pesky force that had arrayed themselves around him. Many had joined their ranks, but were there truly no Sword Soul left to mount a counterattack? Surely they hadn't all been wiped out in the attack, they were such gifted swordsmen. Perhaps the surviving Ice Jades had simply ordered the Sword Souls to remain and protect them, cowards that they were. Albaz, enraged, demanded to know where Ecclesia was, but Aluber continued to play his games. Ecclesia? What a familiar sounding name, but there was no one in his ranks by that name. Albaz screamed in frustration, but knew there was little he could do. Without his dragon forms, he had no way of taking the fight to his nemesis. And what would he even do should he get up there? Fight that colossal dragon with a single shard of ice? Hopelessness didn't even begin to describe how the rebels felt in that moment. However, such dark events only make the light shine that much brighter. Suddenly, the sounds of engines and explosions could be heard in the distance, and like a rising sun, wreathed in fireworks, Kit had arrived, the Springans in tow. Aluber looked on, perplexed at the sight of animated rockets, launching fireworks as if they'd already won, led by what could generously be called a runt among a species of runts. But in no time, the reinforcements had joined the rebels, and with them came the tools to fight back. Sargus, having last been seen as a respectable but out-of-practice hunk of metal, now stood proud as the conqueror of the Therian arena, wearing his champion's belt with pride. And Schrage, already not wanting for firepower, was given a substantial upgrade by Kit. By utilizing the power of the sprites, Bucephalus II was created, a weapon that combined the blue energy their weapons already possessed with the fires of a raging volcano. But this only served to amuse Aluber even further. These were all trinkets, mere toys to add to their collection. Not one of them could scratch the glory of his branded empire. And these specs needed to learn their place. So, with the power of both brands at his disposal, Aluber reached out and pierced the veil of reality. He could sense the great serpent, its corpse still strewn across these golden sands, time not yet having led to decay. And far away, he could sense the body of Long Yuan, the traitorous sword soul, crushed under a mountain of ice at the hands of Mirror Jade. Two pieces that could be stitched together to form a wondrous creation. Aluber beckoned one of the holes to transport Long Yuan here into the very head of the dead serpent, and by pouring the power of the Beyond into this dreadful chimera, the Sword Soul Dragon of the Abyss was born. The newly reborn Long Yuan, their once tactical and cunning mind now clouded by animalistic rage, cackled in delight, knowing there was now a chance to collect vengeance from the one once known as Mirror Jade. Seeing this, Albaz knew there was no time to lose, for there was no telling what other sinister abominations Aluber would throw at them, and at his behest, Schrage commanded the tri-brigade to attack, and with the Springans at their back, the battle had begun. Aluber assumed the form of Lubellian once more, and began to call his forces to his side. The four bestial kings, Druidworm, Magnamut, Serenir, and Baldric took flight, while the dregs of Despia poured forth from their shadowy theater. And joining these forces was another dragon, with wings of stained glass and scales of sickly brass, tied by bloody strands to its rider, a woman of pale complexion and even paler hair, contrasted by piercing red eyes and a crimson dress. This must be another of Dogmatica's saints, Albaz thought. If Aluber will not talk, perhaps she will. The tri-brigade fought back with their weapons, while the Springans launched themselves with explosive, wild abandon. Albaz found himself embroiled against the Despia, locked to the ground and unable to ascend to continue his hunt for Ecclesia. But this wouldn't be the case for long. With the swipe of mechanical claws, Kit came to Albaz's aid, asking if the young dragon had any plans. With a moment of clarity, Albaz thought back to the first time he and Ecclesia had met Kit, running away from the Springans' impromptu assault. Back then, he had utilized some form of his power to animate one of the many machines abandoned in this very wasteland. It was a long shot, but perhaps without the influence of the bestials inside him, some new power could be unleashed to its fullest. And so, Albaz did as he had before, though instead of subconsciously, with purpose. He reached out to the spirit within Mercurier, the tiny bird that had been gifted by Schrage back when this whole odyssey had begun. He bonded that spirit with the machines Kit wore, and within moments, the metal started to grow and change, attempting to fit the righteous dreams and wishes contained in all their hearts. And in a blinding flash, a new tool of victory had revealed itself, as a name flashed into Albaz's mind. Lindworm, the Gun-Hammer Dragon. This power did not go unnoticed, however. Long Yuan, driven now only by his thirst for revenge, witnessed this, and brought all of his crushing power to bear on Albaz and Kit, hoping to wipe them from existence before they could take flight. But Long Yuan was not the only one seeking revenge that day. Before the killing blow could be struck, a wall of ice, that damnable ice, manifested as a shield, heralding the arrival of Aegerin. Having finally come to terms with their mother's death, the last of the Ice Jades had arisen to the rank of Aegerin Jaimir, taking on all the power the station of Empress entailed. and like the previous Empress, a loyal companion was needed to see them through the battles ahead. And so, as Kingfisher had once served Cosmoclore, Adrian breathed new life into Mo Ye, the sword soul that had lost her life at the hands of her mentor's betrayal, creating Ajiro Casus. The sight of this dreadful ice made Long Yuan's blood boil more than the sight of the one who had used it to kill him. And so, before vengeance could be taken, the ice had to be crushed first. Adrian gladly took up the challenge, urging Albaz and Kit to leave, and with the roar of Lindworm's engines, did so, trusting the new Empress of the Ice Jade to win the day. As the battlefield fell below them, Kit called out to Shrag and Sargus, betting on one final assault on Albalos. If Lubellion was dealt with, the rest of his forces may fall. Their companions took heed, and the trio of Sargus, Lindworm, and Shrag made for the twin-headed bestial dragon. Albalos prepared for a counterattack, but by raising its heads in preparation for a mighty breath weapon attack, they had inadvertently made themselves easy targets. Sargus raised an arm and unleashed a pillar of lightning, the same pale purple energy that had once possessed his one-time enemy, now brother-in-arms, Regulus, ringed in Springam's flames. Shrag leveled the Bucephalus cannon fully charged, channeling a column of red and blue energy, and with a single hit, both heads of the dread Albalos were crushed, utterly annihilating the symbol of Dogmatica rule once and for all. Lubellion howled, a mixture of pain and disbelief. How could this have happened? The power of the brand is unstoppable! What could these louts have possibly found in the Land of Iron that Dogmatica hadn't already made its own? These thoughts raged within Lubellion's mind as the body of Albalos fell from the sky, crashing into the Despian Theater. Two threats gone in a matter of moments. And soon, so too would another be dealt with. Racing ahead, lightning cannons fully charged, Lindworm rushed Lubellion, looking to end things once and for all. The smell of ozone filled the air as the weapons crackled to life, and finally, Albaz and Kit shielded their eyes and ears as the concussive sound and blinding luminance of lightning bolts tore the sky asunder. But, despite how close they were to their target, the weapon did not find its mark. When Albaz opened his eyes, between them and Lubellion was the Red Saint, flying on the stained glass wings of their mount, racked with electrical burns. But it was only now, seeing this saint so closely, that Albaz recognized the horror of what had just happened. The Red Saint was Ecclesia, corrupted by the powers of Despia. And as she fell to earth, no longer able to stay aloft, Albaz jumped from Lindworm, hoping there was some way, any way, to save her. Lubellion saw light emanating from Albaz, some new power, locked away until grief provided the key. The leader of the bestial dragons moved to stop this, but a cacophony of crumbling stone and steel grabbed his attention. Below, a colossal being emerged, made of wet, opaque muscle and hands with an alien amount of joints. It was surrounded by halos of holes, commanding them with even more control than Lubellion, the evil god of Dogmatica, a thing lying at the nadir of the nation, wrapped in the shell of Despia. And those wings it had, they were the same as Dramaturge. In fact, Dramaturge and Ad Libitum had been absent since the battle had begun. What could those two possibly be scheming? The final act draws near. Will Albaz and Ecclesia find salvation at the end of all things? What cruelties does Aluber still have in store? And what fate shall befall the Abyss now that White Zoa has been unleashed upon the world? I'll see you here in 3 months' time when Cyberstorm Access releases for the conclusion of the Albaz storyline. But, in the meantime, what are your theories on what's to come? And what's been your favorite part of the lore so far? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to me and Scarlon to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Harry, the ominous benefactor, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Cameron Berg, Corbinisms, Cozyboat 275, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Mana Charge, Marluxia's Girl, Meteornus, Michael Madsen, Mighty Action X, Muzuki Clark, Neo Trinity, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Rem T. Bright, RJ the Jank Monarch, Ruxith Sarani, Sophie, apparently, the Fresh Prince of Conair, the Wizard Moose, True Neutral, Xander Wolfensberger and Xyrus, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Emily, Eva Padilla, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Jesus Garcia, KL, Kale the Dragon, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-de-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, Sarah Loslushi, Shaquille Solomon, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Tucker Ordorn, and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to catch up on the Albaz lore, check out this playlist to learn more. And if you want to see two Yugi-tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.